I need one of these for my little study at home. Cool.
13th of December 2022. The thin ribbon of smoke rising from the bonfire over in the car park next to Stoneacres, Gaz. What, my question is, are you hoping for Christmas?
Would have been a last minute Stoneacres big one, but that's definitely not happening. It's not happening this week anyway.
Vegan turkey?
Vegan turkey, not a fan of the fake vegan turkey, to be honest. Don't know what we're having actually. I might just eat the turkey, to be honest.
No, you won't.
Yeah.
we are in the Lynch Hill Cafe, and looking behind me on the menu board, there were no vegetarian options. Looking behind you, there are some cool carp from Lynch Hill down the years. What would be your like any carp, any time, dead or alive, from this complex?
From here, would have had to have been Choco, I suppose. Such an incredible carp. You know, I think one that as well I kind of had like a little bit of a personal connection with, because some of my friends up north had fished for it in the early days, like mid 2000s, when, you know, carp that bit, 50 pounders, was still pretty rare beasts as well. So yeah, I think that just implanted itself in my head back then for sure. But I mean, it wasn't the scaliest, so it wasn't what it wasn't necessarily what you'd class as a typical Stonies carp as such, but it was a bit Mary-esque as well, wasn't it? I'd never really heard or seen much about Stoneacres until Rob started fishing it. I guess it probably would have been 2006 or 7 when Rob first started fishing up here. And yeah, I'd never, obviously seen bits in the press and stuff like that, but I think having a really close friend that was fishing it is always a bit different, because you get a kind of, you know, a sort of a better connection to a place. You get a deeper insight into it. You know, you get to see all the pictures, hear all their stories firsthand, and yeah, I think that was definitely a big thing for me. Rob literally lived 2 minutes down the road in Mac, so every week I used to go around, have a cup of tea, and I'd get a debrief about his trips, and it just always sounded incredible as well. Like, I think for lots of reasons. A, big stock of incredibly beautiful scaly carp, which is quite rare, I think. And the nature of the fishing, I think, as well, was just so different.
Mm-hmm. Did that mean that you were likely to always come to Stoneacres, or in fact, were you happy that your trajectories might never sort of collide?
I always fancied it, but I think I never really felt like I had the time. I think this place always felt like you needed at least 2, if not 3 nights a week, just because of the nature of the fishing. I think with the boat work, the spot fishing, and it's always been a big drive for me as well. Do you know what I mean? It's always been at least 2 hours plus from home. So yeah, it's sort of, you know, I would always have loved to have fished it, but in honesty, it was never really on my radar for sort of somewhere that I thought I'd actually get to fish.
So when you relocated from the northwest, you actually overshot by 2 hours, didn't you, really?
Yeah, basically.
So,
yeah.
But you never did the whole...
I've never done a lot in Oxford, full stop. Handful of sessions, really, but just on the day tickets, linear and stuff.
So if you could sort of like boil down, before we get into the meat of this, boil down for us what the specific things about Stoneacres and its fish attracted you.
I mean, the fish are just, they've always been some of the best in the country, I think. You know, there's so few lakes that have had a stock of 40, 50, 60, like old strain, jet black, dark, English, scaly carp, with a bit of variety as well. You know, like they don't all look the same. There's like big scattered scale ones. There was fullies back in the day. There's the linears. There's the really long ones. There's the deep boxy ones. You know, it's just a great stock. And I think as well, the nature of the fishing. And just something, I think all the stories I've ever heard about this place over the years, everyone's always conveyed the atmosphere of the lake. And it's very different, I think, to the atmosphere on a lot of lakes. Incredibly laid back, really good spirit, I think, between all the lads. I think it always seems to have had that. I think for whatever reason, the lake seems to have attracted and kind of cultivated that sort of, you know, atmosphere and mindset for the lads that have fished it. And also you can use the boats as well, which just brings another amazing dimension to it.
And actually, had you come here years before, you wouldn't have been quite the expert that you are now, because it's come after your kind of the first flushes of your European obsession, haven't you? And you're good in a boat now.
Yeah, I've certainly had a lot of experience in a boat now. Admittedly, vastly different to how you have to use a boat here, but completely different. But just in terms of general boat skills, yeah, I've done a lot.
I mean, it must be easier on here, right?
No, if anything, I would actually say far more problematic. Feels like it's going to be easier in a way, but actually it's not, because of the precision of the fishing. It becomes incredibly technically difficult. Whereas in Europe, you know, you'd often be dropping on a spot as big as this calf or something like that. You know, doesn't matter if you're 15 yards from your bottom marker. You know, you're dropping on a big area that you've baited big and wide. On here, you're literally sometimes dropping on spots that are as big as a bucket lid. You know, I'm sure lads out there, you know, might hear that and think, but they are. Some of the spots are literally only just about big enough to lay a rig on and a bit of bait. And yeah, it's fine if it's flat calm. Put a big wind into the equation, or take a bit of viz out, and it becomes really, really frustrating and often painfully difficult. So yeah. So
cards on the table, Gaz. Was there a fish that was front and centre?
I remembered what I was going to say. Big Dan said to me, he was like, "You'll love Stoneacres, mate." He's like, "It's like fishing in Europe, but in England." He was like, "You can drive around, park on the grass behind your swim, fish out the van, boats, 4 rods, super cheap. It's like Europe, but for big English fish." And I think, you know, in a lot of respects, he's dead right with that, really.
So when did you get your ticket?
Last year. So I've had it for 2 years. It's my second year.
You did the classic, get my ticket, let it all settle, then turn up the next year?
Can't afford to do that, mate. It's not a cheap ticket. That wasn't my plan at all. It was a weird time, wasn't it? We were just out of lockdown. No one really knew what was going on. I'd had a bit of a sort of a kind of strange time, I think, in my own fishing. I'd sort of hadn't lost the buzz for it, but I was kind of definitely in a bit of a transition between just working out where I was, I think, with it and what I wanted to do. I think had been doing an awful lot in Europe, envisaged me doing that for the foreseeable future, and then suddenly lockdown and Brexit just put a massive, you know, halt to that. Like from nowhere, you know, suddenly travel became incredibly restricted, prohibited, and also unbelievably expensive. Going from having a Eurotunnel frequent traveller where you could do 5 trips for just over 400 quid, so like 80 quid a trip, 90 quid a trip, to it being 200-300 quid a trip, and diesel prices and everything else. Do you know what I mean? Just suddenly fishing in Europe 4 or 5 times a year, it wasn't an option anymore. So it just seemed like the perfect time to get stuck in.
That's UKPB common as well.
They've always been some of the best in the country. There's so few lakes that have had a stock of 40, 50, 60, like old strain, jet black, dark, English, scaly carp. He was like, "You'll love Stoneacres, mate. It's like Europe, but for big English fish."
Yes, brother.
We saw an absolute giant that evening as well. It must have been one of the big ones, like 45 plus, just on dark, just wallowed out, big lazy show, massive set of rings. It's come under the boat. I remember seeing it straight away and thinking, shit, like that's a big fish. It's a mega one, isn't it? Beautiful creature.